Hello, everyone. Happy debate day, guys. Happy Biden-Trump debate day. It's an exciting day, but we're going to get to that later. Today, I'm very excited to have on a really special guest. So I became aware of Jim here when I tweeted something about thinking about a topic for my next book, and I thought I was going to do like a full frontal attack on white fragility. And someone tweeted at me that Jim had already done it. And so I was like, I got to get this book right here called The Myth of White Fragility, a field guide to identifying and overcoming race grifters. And I got to get Jim on the channel to have a talk about this, because anytime that I can complain about white fragility and how absurd this ideology is with like-minded people, I am a happy camper. So let's see. Jim is the president of Security Studies Group and previously served in the U.S. Armed Special Forces. He has now shifted his focus to the battle going on for the soul of America. There is an ongoing effort by active left to claim the country is infected with systemic racism and the very core of America is rotten and must be replaced. And he doesn't agree with that. So we're going to talk about that. Jim, welcome to my channel.
Good to be with you.
Absolutely. So why don't we just start off at the very beginning? What inspired you to write this book?
Yeah, I have a buddy who works for a Fortune 100 company, and they were beating him over the head with it at work. And he was trying to figure out, okay, I want to be a good, corporate executive. I want to do the right thing. I want to be inclusive, which is, one of the other buzzwords. And so he was trying to do it, but every time that any of the people discussed it, they started mentioning things like the book says, that all white people are racist, that systemic racism infects every organization and system in the country, that makes the United States a white supremacist nation. And he couldn't buy it. And I don't blame him. First of all, none of those things are true. And second of all, they're grotesque things to say. So he asked me if I had any safety tips for him. How do you talk about this without getting fired? And I said I would read the book. And I did. And after throwing it against the wall probably 7 or 8 times, I made it through. And then I spent the next 5 days writing that because I was mad. I was disgusted. And I was angry, and there was so much wrongness in it, and not just difference of opinion wrongness, but absolute screaming factual inaccuracies, logical fallacies, circular reasoning, and just blatant outright racism in the book. So I fired back at him.
I completely agree with you. And I actually loved the way you just even started off your book. In the foreword, you said, I'm not a racist, and you probably aren't either. But the book White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo says I am a racist. And if I'm not, that shows that I am most definitely a racist. And when I take offense to being called a racist, that's further proof of my racism. It's crazy talk, but that's where we are today. And I got to tell you, I read White Fragility as well, and I descended into madness in the reading of that book. There's a video of me where I actually looked like I'm going crazy when I'm about halfway through the book because it was so absurd. So, I mean, listen, like I'm also an organizational psychologist. I don't know if you know much about my background, and white fragility and this anti-racist training has taken over my industry. Like I can't even sell normal traditional trainings anymore because everyone everywhere is doing this anti-racist training. What impact do you think that these ideas are going to have on team building and organizations?
Well, they're going to have an anti-team building effect on organizations because anti-racism is essentially racist and divisive. So the idea that you're going to take a country that has managed to, other than the activist class, start not caring about race. There are a lot of things, that used to be big hot button issues that now people are just meh. Oh, you're gay. Well, that's cute. Who cares? You're black, you're brown, you're whatever you are. If you're not hurting me, most people in America don't really care anymore, and I think that progress was hard fought. The civil rights movement earned that, and the gay rights movement earned that. There was a time when there was racism and, homophobia and other things that were horrible. But once we got past them, what happened was the activist class and the left relies on identity politics for their power bases. They needed grievances. And so they decided we're going to invent grievances now since there are no, so microaggressions and these other things that they use to create grievances where there really aren't any are now, part of the game, and they're tearing the country back apart, which is sad.
It's incredibly sad. And, I get emails all the time because I've talked a lot about how crazy white fragility is on my channel. I remember this one particular email I got from a woman who was forced by her workplace to read White Fragility. And she wrote me, she said, Carlin, I became depressed after I read White Fragility because it told me I was a racist and I was irredeemable and there was nothing I could do about it. And no one said anything differently until I saw one of your videos. And that to me is incredibly upsetting that this is not only causing actual harm to cohesion and team building, which are things that I care about, but this is actually causing harm to individuals who are kind of put in these environments where everyone around them seems to be buying into these crazy ideas and not realizing that these are not correct ideas at all. Why do you think these ideas are so addictive?
Fear. I think what it is people are scared still of being called a racist. There was a time when that was basically, other than being called a child molester, the worst thing you could say about a person in America. You're a racist. And so people have this natural fear that if you're labeled as a racist in any way, you're going to lose, your job. You're going to lose the people who you associate with. You're going to lose friends, everything. And that was legit for a very long time, and it still is. And that fear is, it's part of the cancel culture. It's part of the other, things that they use to go ahead and propagate their ideology. And now the problem they have is they have so devalued the word racist that it no longer has the sting. If all white people are racist, then I lose nothing by standing up to you and saying, screw you. I am not. I don't care. I may think things and I may do things, but I don't do them based on the color of someone's skin. I do them based on whether they're a good or a bad person. Something like the content of their character, I think, sticks in my head. Something about judging people. Yeah, and rather than ignoring that, which in the book, they literally say you have to ignore Martin Luther King's concept, the way it's been explained to the world, because you have to focus on color first. And then, and only then, can you solve problems. And that's just exactly the opposite of what's needed.
Now, you mentioned, kind of we talked about the definition of like them calling people a racist, right? In your book, you talk about how the woke have tried to change the definition of racism to kind of suit their purposes. Can you tell us a little bit more about how they've changed the definition?
I mean, it's actually a really good trick. I'll give them credit, for trying this, because if you're going to do what they're trying to do, you can't have racism have its natural definition, which is a bias against people based on the color of their skin. What you have to have is what they did. And they said, no, racism is people in power being biased naturally against other people based on the color of their skin, which their definition of people in power is white people only. So they went ahead and just took the whole idea, because all people are in some way, shape, or form biased. People naturally have a fear of the other. It is a survival mechanism. It's part of tribalism. It's got nothing to do with racism. It happens out of your animal brain. Your lizard brain says, oh my God, that's different from me. So I fear it for a second. Then you go, oh, wait a minute. That's just my neighbor. He's black. Okay. He's not a problem. And you go ahead and overcome that with your conscious mind. I can't believe I'm talking this kind of stuff with an actual psychologist, but yeah, bear with me as I make these amateur mistakes.
Great job. You're doing good.
But the end result is now they wanted to change it so that when you look at any white person, because they're in a position of power, they went even further than just saying you are now racist because of your position of power, but they said you don't even have to do anything. Your very existence as a white person in the white supremacist states of America makes you a racist, and you owe for that. And so now you have to put on the hair shirt and flog yourself, and go ahead and get out of the way so that all the other people you're oppressing can rise to their natural level, because systemic racism kept them down. And that's a fundamentally flawed way to operate a good society.
Well, it's completely flawed. And I think one of the things that these companies who are implementing this racist ideology don't really understand is that when they say systemic racism, they mean you too. They would just assume, like, they mean literally everything. They mean every institution in our society, to include the businesses who are now saying Black Lives Matter and making people read White Fragility. They want to tear you down just as much as they want to tear everything else down. Am I right?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, the thing about the anti-racist thing is it's the shiny penny right now. All right. The reason it has come to the forefront is because it's part of a larger agenda, but it's the thing that they can get the hysteria and the furor going about because of the riots and because of the Black Lives Matter movement. So they've been insinuating it into our culture for a while, but it's part of the whole state control equality of outcome package that you can call socialism, you can call statism, you can call wokeness. You know, what they want is they want to control outcomes so that everybody gets an equal outcome, not equal opportunity, which runs into the fundamental problem that people are fundamentally unequal. So the only way to do that is if you have state control, then you can go ahead and mandate equality of outcomes. And that's what they're doing right now. That's the end state of anti-racism training and the entire wokeness movement is they're going to go ahead and declare new winners and losers based on this and not go ahead and basically say the system is so flawed because of racism that no one who isn't a white person can succeed to the extent that they're supposed to. And I mean, it's an evil, treacherous game, but it is part of that larger concept where they want to control your thoughts and your deeds and the outcomes. And this is just the best way to do it because it fits with the riots and the fear.
Mm-hmm. You know, I actually did a live stream on my channel yesterday where I found this. There's this one woman in Minnesota, and she's actually implemented this program at the University of Minnesota. She came up with a 12-step program to help white people recover from their whiteness. It's based on the 12 steps in AA to help you recover from being white. And some of those steps are, first, you have to admit that you have a problem. That's step number one. You have to admit that you're a racist. And then some of the other steps include you have to stop listening to white people and only listen to people of color. Like, where did I know? Like, I think relatively young. I'm middle aged now, but like I'm a relatively young person compared to some. And I remember growing up and going to school. What I was taught was you treat everyone equally. You don't treat someone based on like the color of their skin or their gender. You treat every single person the same. When did this shift happen?
I think identity politics became such a central organizing tool and power-based mechanism for the left. And at this point, the Democrat Party is essentially subordinate to the activist left. And when they did that, it required that they re-slot everybody, into your preferred victim group or your approved victim group. And so if you were a person of color, or if you're Black or whatever, however they wanted to organize it, they had to do that. Now, I think it all stems from, and I think the core flaw in this whole thing is liberal guilt. All right, the liberals who ran academia for so many years and started inventing all of the intersectional type disciplines in academia took their own guilt and went ahead and applied it to the way everyone should react to these different identity groups. So you should feel guilty that gay people had a hard time. You should feel guilty that slavery was a founding part of the United States, and therefore you still owe for that. And they used that as basically a tool, to create momentum for implementing these things. And that is the driving force is you're supposed to feel bad because you succeeded. You didn't succeed. In my case, I joined the Army when I was 18 years old. All right. Everything I've gotten since then, no one gave me. No one carried my rucksack up and down mountains. No one gotten in the way of bullets that were shot at me or anything like that. Nobody did that. I did it. And then when I got out, I didn't inherit money. I didn't do anything else. All of the things I did were results based. So my failures and my successes are my own. And they want to take that away and say, no, they're not. Therefore, you have to allow us to set up a system where people who didn't succeed for whatever reason will succeed. So we get our desired equality of outcome.
Mm-hmm. Now, so let's talk about the military for a second, because President Donald Trump just issued his second executive order around banning critical race theory in the government, which I was like, so excited about. And
Yeah.
one of the things that he talks about is banning it in the armed forces. And this crap was being taught at West Point, and I believe it
Mhm.
was being taught at the Air Force Academy as well. What impact do you think that this ideology would have on people serving in the military and in terms of like cohesion and things like that?
It is quite possibly the worst thing you can do to an organization that relies on everyone trusting the person next to them to have their back regardless. There was a saying we used to say, everybody bleeds red and the only color we see is green. All right, because that was legitimate. You had to. I mean, the only thing it can do is create doubt both in black people in the military and in white people in the military that we're acting in concert. And absent that, you're going to get people killed. They are literally going to get people killed. Now, you brought up Trump's EO. That is one of the greatest things that has happened in a long time, because he said, okay, in government training anywhere, you cannot conduct any training that violates Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, which says you can't say people are racist based on the color of their skin. You can't discriminate based on the color of people's skin. You can't discriminate against people because what people with a particular skin color did in the past. And it's all written in that EO. But he went farther and he said this also applies to government contractors and to recipients of grants, which is massive, because that gets at academia, and it also gets at my poor buddies, corporate trainers. Because right now, they mention in there, he says that the EO tells the attorney general to prepare for lawsuits based on Title VII, claiming a hostile work environment for people who are forced to play along with this training that, you have to say, I am a poor white racist, and I now will atone for my sins. So I think that was just a sea change in the ground that the left had won, because they now can't do that. They just absolutely can't do it. And if you're a corporation doing it, you right now have huge liability. Those lawyers at the Fortune 100 are losing it because they know they're open to class action lawsuits, and I hope they're coming.
Oh, and I know I have a lot of contacts in the HR community because I presented at like the Society for Human Resources annual conference and all this stuff, and they're losing their minds right now, and it is glorious. And a lot of my clients, because I've basically, like, I have a training practice. I basically put pause on my corporate training right now simply because I don't want to do this type of training. It's not something that interests me at all, and I think it's incredibly damaging. But watching the industry fall down before my very eyes, I'm like, this is the best thing. And I don't wish people ill in any way, but this stuff is just so detrimental to people, and it needs to be killed off for good. And I think that banning it from government contractors, that gets at so many businesses. It gets at some of the biggest businesses in the world, right down to, I have many clients, and I specialized in small to mid-sized businesses, many small to mid-sized businesses that don't want to give up their lucrative $150 million government contracts. And so they're not going to be able to do it anymore. So I agree. I think that this was an amazing move by Donald Trump. I just want to take a couple super chats really quickly. So someone asked even before our chat started, have you ever read White Guilt by Shelby Steele? Are you familiar with that book?
I'm familiar with it, yeah. And it's basically outlines the precursors to this. And it tells where the whole concept from liberal guilt through the rest of it comes from, that the rest of this stuff is based on. And it's a coping mechanism. Essentially it was a coping mechanism for the left, who felt these things and who felt that they had somehow benefited in a way that they owed for. Now, let me state up front, there are plenty of problems with disparate outcome for Black people in this country. And I want those to be changed. I want those things to change. But you can't change them by waving a magic wand of systemic racism and then apply the anti-racism vaccine and all of a sudden change the root causes for a lot of these problems. Part of what this entire anti-racism training thing does is it allows the left to avoid some of the very dangerous root causes for the Black community that are leading to things like the school to prison pipeline, leading to lesser achievement, leading to less household wealth. The problem of fatherlessness in the Black community is probably, in my mind, a direct creation of the Great Society of the welfare state. You created a time where women who had children no longer had to have the father, because Uncle Sugar would write a check and all of a sudden the kids are fed, everything's fine. And that led to a decrease in intact families for the Black community, which is the number one predictor of success for children. You know, a two-parent household is the number one predictor of success for a child. And, you know, as far as that goes, I don't care if it's a gay household, Black, brown, I don't care. But if you don't have it, that child's at a disadvantage. And the Black community has some 60+%, you know, non-intact families for the children. And they don't have to then deal with that, because you can say, oh, the problem is systemic racism. It's not these root causes in the community that are much more difficult and painful. And you get accused of blaming the victim for bringing it up. You know, and I don't have any hate for the people. I want them to succeed. I want to come up with solutions that will deal with those root causes and get them to stay in school and get them to do the things that raise any poor kid, regardless of their color, out of poverty. You know, there are simple things to do. You don't get married yet. You stay in school and you do these simple things, and it doesn't matter what color you are, you succeed more than your peers. And so I want to stop pretending that there is a magic bullet for this and go ahead and dig deep in, and let's all go ahead and say, let's work on this at the root and fix the problem, rather than just painting, you know, over it and declaring new winners.
Yeah. You know, there was a meditation program that they started to implement in inner city schools in Baltimore about 3 years ago, where these two guys, Black guys, which doesn't really matter normally, but I feel like I have to say that in the context of this conversation, they came up with a meditation program to teach children. They do a couple times a day in public schools. They teach children how to do deep breathing. They teach children how to do yoga, and they do this several times throughout the day. And when these kids get in trouble, they don't actually go to detention. They go to the mindfulness room and they learn how to do their deep breathing and how to work through whatever conflict that they're having. And what they found implementing these programs is that attendance rates shot up and suspension rates, like suspensions, plummeted to 0 in these schools. And I love these programs because they're teaching these kids at a very young age how to empower themselves to get through their problems. And it just makes me so sad that what this ideology is going to come in and do is to teach these kids that your problems and your challenges are not your fault. They're the fault of everyone else. And you should be looking to society and the government to fix those problems for you. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I think the idea is it's been a symptom of liberal rule for a long time, is they need a victim class. You know, they need a perpetual client class to go ahead and administer their programs, you know, and go ahead and be the great providers. And the idea for these kids is, if you're taught that you don't have responsibility for your own actions, you know, and a lot of them, that's one of the problems with single parent households, is that you don't have two parents to keep discipline for a kid, to show them the ropes, to keep them in their lane. You know, it's hard enough with two parents to do it, let alone with one. And I was a single parent for a time with a small daughter, and it was amazing just trying to keep her in line. So I think the idea of whatever we as a society can do to go ahead and provide support for that, support to say, okay, here you go, kid. You know, life is tough. And let me point out to you, it's not always going to be easy, but you have to take an interest in your own success, regardless of who else does. Hopefully it's happening at home, but if it's not, maybe we can at school help you a little bit. Maybe we can teach you that, you know, violence and anger and these things that are counterproductive aren't going to get you where you want, and maybe chilling out a little bit. I like it. I like, oh, yeah, we could do that. I think it's fantastic that you're doing something creative to go ahead and help these kids deal with their lives in a way that can lead them to success. And that's the opposite. Anti-racism training teaches them it's not their fault. They're not responsible. You know, it was the evil racist people, and therefore, like you said, they deserve a handout. And no, nobody deserves a hand. I'm sorry. What you deserve is air and opportunity.
I actually even think it's even more detrimental than that, because one of the things that we know that leads to individual success is the choice to see that success is a possibility in this lifetime. This is research that's come out of the University of Pennsylvania. It's called the success mindset, which says that the people who are, and it sounds like the simplest thing in the world, right? People who are successful in the world choose to see that they have the opportunity to be successful in the world. If you don't fundamentally think that you can win, then you're probably not going to sign up and play the game. And what this ideology teaches people is that they just don't have any chance because the entire world is working against them. So why should they even try anyway? And so it's going to keep a lot of people that, are perfectly capable, perfectly intelligent, could go and do everything they need to do to be successful. It's going to fundamentally keep them down just because it's ingrained this ridiculous ideology. I want to take this super chat from Hank Reardon. Good name. When I was in the Army, we were told that the only color is green, and it really seemed to apply to all people, and we all worked together. So, Jim, the other day I saw an article from The Hill that basically was like, it was essentially saying that the people that are like higher ups in the military were completely against Trump's ban on critical race theory. Do you have any insight into how people in the military feel about what Trump has done in this area?
There is the biggest disconnect in the military is between the flag officer rank, generals and admirals, and the rest of the military. And the problem is, once you become a 1-star of any flavor, you are almost a political animal more than you are a leader. So the lower levels of officers have to deal with real problems. They have to lead troops. They have to conduct missions successfully. They have to build a team, to do all this. And the NCOs, the sergeants, I was an NCO. You have to have a one-on-one relationship with your people. They have to know that you have their best interests in heart, and you have to know that they are going to do what you tell them to do. There has to be that. Then that's a really high level of trust necessary when you're telling someone to do something that might get them killed. So, and the idea that you've generated that esprit de corps and rapport both up and down the food chain and then horizontally is vital. And the problem is, in order to get promoted up to that top level, you have to play political games and you have to do those kind of things. And you build policies like diversity and inclusion and all these things, which they were told to do. The military's long been a test bed for our social programs. It was one of the first places to be integrated, first place to give women full rights. There's any number of things that the military has done first. So it's not odd for this type of stuff to have taken hold there, at that general officer class level. But right now, it is so fundamental. The previous things, you're saying, oh, well, black people won't work out in the military. Well, we found out that was garbage. And women won't work in the military. Well, we found out that was garbage. And now you're dealing with something that, as opposed to saying, overcoming a prejudice, they're creating a prejudice in order to explain disparate outcome. And I think that is so toxic that it needs to stop. Unfortunately, the president put a shrieking, screaming halt to it.
Absolutely. So I'm not trying to say your name, wants us to back up here a little bit. Can you explain again what the SJW reasoning is for saying that white people are born racist? Probably a good place to start.
Yeah, well, I think it may be less the born, but by being born in America, the country was founded on racist principles, slavery, and oppression. Only white male landowners could vote. And those are wrong. Those things are so fundamentally, egregiously wrong that they should offend any decent person. But we changed them. Yes. That was the whole point. The founding was the greatest thing done at the time. And every day since, we have bent the arc of the universe towards moral justice, to do another Dr. King quote, because that's fun, in a way that has stopped those things that were oppressive. Now we're in a situation where the claim by the left and the social justice woke warriors is that because those things existed, everything that was built on them is still a racist construct. So every organization, every institution, every system in the United States is infected with systemic racism. And the difference, now there's institutional racism is what was ended. Institutional racism was black people can't come to the lunch counter. All right, that was institutional racism. Black people can't serve in the military, whatever. All right, that was ended. Systemic racism is another of the left's good tricks because you can't find it. There's no way there is no such thing. You can't say, oh, well, there's systemic racism. What they do is they say, black people go to prison more than white people. Therefore, the justice system is infected with systemic racism. Well, the correct way to do something like that is you would say, okay, we have a disparate outcome. More black people go to prison than white people as a percentage of the population. Let's look at all the things that could contribute to that. And that would give you a list of things, some of which are the fact that right now, black people commit 4 times as much violent crime as white people. So that's a direct reason there are more black people in prison than white people. The racists didn't commit those crimes. Violent crimes are not something that the police invent. Violent crimes happen and the police clean up after the violent crimes. So that's not a place where you could say that the racism did it. Then they go from there to saying, but because that disparate outcome exists, we'll ignore the root causes and we'll just say that that's systemic racism. And when you ask them, how do you prove it? They say, because there's a disparate outcome and more black people go to prison. And he said, no, that's circular reasoning and that's cheating. So that's really their rationale says, because all those systems create disparate outcomes and white people benefit, they created the new idea of racism. And they actually literally call it a new definition of racism that says, if you're white, you benefit from this, therefore you are racist unless you're working to end those systems. So you have to become an anti-racist or you remain a racist. Silence is violence. It's another version of that.
Absolutely. And I want to just I want to jump into questions from the locals community that I think are going to allow us to continue to go down this train, because I know we have a limited amount of time today and I've got a bunch of questions that people sent in. So Hank Reardon, again from Locals, thank you Hank for being a supporter in Locals, says, as a white man, I'm apparently racist no matter what my thoughts and actions are. If I were to take the CRT training, read White Fragility, do the 12 steps to overcome my whiteness, I will still be considered racist because I'm still a white man. So what's the end game here? Apparently nothing I can do will relieve me of my supposed racism. So now what? Other than a never-ending cycle of creating a new, lower version of myself. What is their end game?
Well, I think they do actually believe if you become an active anti-racist, which means you actually have to give up. So more along the lines of your 12-step program for overcoming whiteness, the idea is you say, I am no longer, as you mentioned previously, I'm not going to read white authors. I'm only going to read black authors. I'm not going to hire white people. I'm only going to hire black people. I'm not going to do things. I'm not going to take advantage of a system that advances me. I'm going to make sure that my every choice advances a person of color, a black person, whoever. And they think that then allows you, I don't know how long you have to do it because they've only invented this recently. This is a recent bad idea. But you have to start actually submitting and backing off your privilege. Like on corporate boards, if there aren't enough black people on a corporate board, the white directors of that board are supposed to resign. They're supposed to get out of the way and allow someone to go up. And the problem with all of those things is they're racist. You're going ahead and literally establishing a different kind of racism in order to fix a problem that no longer is provably caused by racism. So to Hank's point, there's nothing you can do about it yet except stand up and say, no, not me. I'm not going to, I don't think you're the kowtowing type. The Hank Reardons of the world are not the people who are knuckling under to this. But you have to have legitimate arguments saying, I refuse to accept this. Number one, it's racist. Number two, it's against the Civil Rights Act. Number three, I am responsible for my actions, not for what you think my thoughts are. And now it's fair to just stand up and say, I'm not going to accept your label.
I might push back on you a little bit that you can overcome being a racist. And I say that specifically because in White Fragility, Robin DiAngelo says a couple of times, she says, I was racist in the womb. And then she says, she actually towards the end of the book apologizes for her racism. And she says, my friends just know I'm a racist because that's the way it is. That's the way I will socialize. And it'll be a lifelong problem that I'm constantly working on. Robin DiAngelo is a piece of work. What do you think of her specifically?
Yeah, she actually is working that 12-step program. She, because the first thing, I admit you are powerless over your addiction, right, is one of the 12 steps. And so she has admitted she is powerless over her racism. And as pathetic as that is, she is a perfect example of the activist left. They don't want to fix problems because problems are their business. Yeah. So if you fix the problem, you take away your client state, you take away your victim groups, and then all of a sudden we're just back to being America again. And that's not what they want. They don't want that. Now, I think you're fairly saying that they don't want it to come to fruition where you can fix yourself and now you're no longer racist. I think that's fair. I think they want you on the path. So they want you as a member of the anti-racist team, helping make sure that their new quotas and their new version of racism elevates some Black people to the level, but not too many, because if we get too many, then we run out of our victim group and we don't have anything to complain about.
You know, it's funny. I was reading, I got my hands on an internal memo from Delta Airlines the other day where Delta was talking about how they are a fundamentally racist country or company and they're going to do all this stuff to combat their racism. But then they gave their stats of what their demographics of their employees look like. And they actually overemploy a percentage of Black employees for based on the percentage of Black America. They have significantly more employed at Delta than the general population. I was like, well, what is the goal then? What are you trying to achieve? This makes no sense. But, Delta's going to Delta. I've got a couple questions from Artemisia and Lindenbrook in the locals community that are kind of similar, so I think we'll just do them together. Artemisia wants to know, what can the average citizen do to fight back and make a change? And Lindenbrook wants to know, if CRT and wokeness is a belief system akin to a religious belief, how do we hope to combat it with facts and reason? And I know you have some insights there for what people can do when confronted with white fragility.
The first thing is learn what they're teaching, which is part of what we've been talking about. Understand what their argument is, because when you just say all white people are racist, people go, that's idiotic. That's just the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. But once you understand that they redefined racism and they've got all these things that they claim create a coherent belief system, okay, at least now we've got something to base it on. But then the first thing you have to understand is you can stand up and say no. And you don't have to do it in a way that is angry or is, uncaring, or any of these other things that they like to accuse people on the right to be. You can say, I do. When I open a conversation about this, the first thing I like to do is say, I believe there are problems in the Black community that we should all want to fix. Mm-hmm. We differ on what will actually help to fix them. So let's talk about that. And then you're in a situation where now you haven't created a confrontation. You haven't said, well, you're freaking crazy, which it's easy to do. I want to do it. My first reaction is that's absurd. But if you don't say, well, that's absurd. If you say, look, I understand what you're trying to do. I know you want to help the Black community. Great. So do I. All right. And I have some ideas. I have ideas about what might help the Black community. I think meditation in the classrooms, great idea. There's a lot of things you could do. But let's not say that the first thing we should do is go ahead and resegregate the country to fix a problem that we fixed by desegregating the country. So you have to have a way to approach the situation. And I think it's fair to call it religion. I think that liberalism, activism, wokeness, all these things are, in most cases, liberal replacements for religion. And they treat it that. There's a dogma to it. There's worshiping. You can be shunned as a heretic. All of those things from fundamentalist style religions are present in the activist left. So I think approaching like that, and here's the next thing, you're not going to fix those people. All right, assume they're lost to you. You're never going to change the hard left. So when I have an argument with someone of the left about a topic like this, I'm not arguing to change their mind. I'm arguing to allow the people who are watching, the lurkers, right, like people like your audience, people who are, anytime I'm talking to someone like that in a public forum on Twitter, on TV or whatever, my argument is not designed to change the mind of the hardcore leftist I'm talking to. It's to expose the hypocrisy in their view, to expose the flaws in their argument, the logical fallacies, the circular reasoning, and the fact that this doesn't actually fix the problem, and allow people to go, hey, well, if it doesn't fix the problem, why would we do it? Mm-hmm. And so you want to give people ammunition that allows them to go ahead the next time they're at a backyard barbecue, or someone comes for Thanksgiving, or they're at a PTA meeting and they're saying, why are my kids coming home telling me I'm a racist? Mm-hmm. You need to have good answers for that, not just how dare you, angry, don't play to the stereotype the left likes to project onto us as being angry haters. I find more often than not, if the left is accusing me of something, it's because that's what they feel. They're pure projection. And so just don't give them what they're looking for. Don't respond that way. Respond with facts and logic, And in a lot of cases, they'll be so surprised they won't know what to do.
Oh, they have no idea what to do. And yeah, the ironclad law of woke projection is always in full effect, as James Lindsay calls it. We got one more question from locals. This one is from Edible Words. And I think this has to do with, have you been following what's been happening around Amy Coney Barrett's Supreme Court nomination and what's going on with her family? Yeah. So guys, if you haven't been following, essentially Amy Coney Barrett, one of the ways that they're going about attacking her is she has 2 adopted children from Haiti. And they are starting to attack. Ibram X. Kendi actually attacked her for adopting these kids and accused her of maybe stealing the kids from their families. And so Edible Words in my locals wants to know, any adopted child would potentially be facing some kind of discrimination because of poverty or birth, parental status, age, or disability. So doesn't that make it difficult to sort with all the accusing of adopted parents of every race of inherent bias or bigotry? I mean, like, and I think this is one of those ways in which they're just showing their own hypocrisy in the situation. And I especially feel, honestly, for biracial families. I don't know what they're doing in this whole mess at all. Any insight there?
The ones I know, and I know quite a few, and I was married to a Black woman, so I understand the difficulty that they have in dealing with the fact that now you're essentially trying to drive a wedge between people who got past this. Yeah. You know, if you're in a biracial marriage, or if you have a biracial family, you have literally bridged that gap, and you're living it every day. And the idea, this Ibram Kendi, he's the guide to anti-racism, whatever. I had an argument with him on Twitter about this exact topic, and it's grotesque. It's absurdly not just biased, but it's obscenely rude to take someone who did one of the greatest goods you can do, to personally offer your comfort to someone who is suffering, based not on the color of their skin, but on their need, which is what Amy Coney Barrett did when she adopted these kids. And now she's raising them, and their family is happy as clams, and they're not involved in this game at all. They're involved in being a good family. And for people to go ahead and try to say that this somehow is a vestige of racism, or the great white messiah complex, or any of these other things they like to bring in, is just a sign of how intellectually bankrupt the arguments of the anti-racism movement are, is because they have to invent things like that when someone is demonstrably doing a good. It's hard to picture a greater good than to pull someone out of Haiti, bring them to the United States, and make them part of your family. That is about as decent as you can get. And so I think the fact that they're attacking that shows that their argument is not just missing, it is fundamentally wrong.
Absolutely. Well, Jim, I know you have a call at the top of the hour, so I want to give you a little bit of a break in between our chat and the call. But again, I just want to recommend everyone pick up a copy of Jim's book, The Myth of White Fragility. The link to his Amazon is in the description below. And Jim, you said that this is going to be the first in a series of books, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of elements of woke culture and of the assault on America by the left. They want to burn it down and rebuild it as a socialist crap hole. And I'm kind of fundamentally against that. So we're going to do one on the Second Amendment and the militia. We're going to do one on free speech, and we're going to do one on a new education system, all of which are fundamental tenets. Yeah, you can't let them train the kids to be anti-American, which is what they're getting away with. So
yeah, absolutely. I had a video on my channel just the other day. I got a hold of a curriculum for a class that was required for seniors in high school, where they're teaching literally all of this stuff, and the seniors need to take it to graduate. And one of the mothers was so mad that she forwarded me the whole curriculum. Nice. So people are fighting back, and I just want to thank you for the work that you're doing. Thank you for speaking out about this. And if you ever want to come back and have another chat anytime, you are more than welcome, my friend.
It was a lot of fun. Thanks to everybody who's watching.
Thank you. All right, guys, I'll see you soon, and happy debate night. And yeah, I'll be snarkily tweeting the debate later, and I hope you will be too. And all right, that's all we got for today.